Deliver, monitor and evaluate customer service S325 is a unit which is part of the SQA's Business Administration vocational units. If we have a wee look at the description that's within the course guide, the unit guide, the standard is about delivering, monitoring and evaluating and improving customer service to meet internal or external customer needs. It includes identifying customer needs and expectations, providing services to agreed timescales and quality standards, and taking action to improve services based on feedback. It is for administrators who work solely with internal customers or solely with external customers, or with both internal and external customers. The key takeaway from this is that you don't have to be working with customers in the traditional sense, as in it doesn't have to be people or organisations who are paying money to your organisation for goods and services and that they're not employed or within your organisation. That is typically what you'd think when you think about a customer, but this unit makes explicitly clear in the unit guide that customers can also be, for the purpose of this unit, people within your organisation which you provide a service to. So, for example, if you are working in a business administration role and some of your responsibilities include processing documents for another team onto a computer system, then that would be you providing a service to another team. And you could gather evidence, produce statements on tasks such as that. So it's where you're providing a service, so you're doing something for people who are employed within your organisation. That would be an internal customer, and you can gather evidence for that. Customer service is a very important aspect of working in any industry. Customers are essential for the success of a business, and it's very, very important to deal with them effectively, to deal with them properly, and to a very high standard, because ultimately customers, particularly customers, external customers, have got choice and may choose to go elsewhere if they feel like they've experienced low customer service. Good customer service increases your organisation's reputation, both internally and externally, and can lead to more business or an advantage over another organisation that could provide similar goods or services to yours. And it's particularly important to work in a business administration role, because a lot of the time you'll be either in a customer facing role or working with customers as an internal customers within your organisation. So let's look at the learning outcomes for this unit. There are three. So the first is that you can identify customer needs and expectations. When you're delivering, providing customer service, that is the first step, and that is what the first outcome is about. So it's about, firstly, you need to identify what customers want and what they expect, and from that you can then, we'll look at outcome two, deliver those customer services. But delivering customer services isn't the end of the process. The third step, the third learning outcome, would be to monitor and evaluate the customer services that are being delivered, and only then can you look at doing some continuous improvement and reflecting upon how can your customer service be improved, or how can your organisation's customer service processes be improved. This unit is at SCQF level 6, and there's 3 credit values for this unit. So let's look at the key points for this. So I've already mentioned this a little bit, but it's key to remember that you can use examples for external customers and internal customers. So internal customers being people who work within your organisation, so for example someone in a different team, and external customers are customers outside the organisation, such as clients, buyers or suppliers. So it doesn't have to just be customers who are, even if it's external, it doesn't have to be just people who are paying your organisation money. Customers would still be suppliers. It could also fall into this category for this unit. External customers can also be organisations. They don't necessarily have to just be individuals. And internal customers are people or departments within your organisation who you provide a service to. So for example, data processing, filing, generating reports for, creating lists, providing with prices internally. Those sorts of services. That's not an exhaustive list. There are other examples as well, depending on your organisation, which you should be able to think of. You know, what do you do for other people within your organisation, and that would give you an idea of some of the services which would be provided to internal customers. Okay. So what are products and services relevant to internal customers? So internal customers would look for things such as price lists, They may look for things such as schedules, time frames, particularly if you're involved in maybe working with projects or working with one-off jobs which are set to schedule and have got an end date. Project briefs, operational briefs, any sort of brief about how an activity is going to be conducted, who's involved in it, start dates, end dates, the resources that are required, the finances that are involved, the order in which tasks are going to be done. Could also be marketing leads. So a lot of the time, marketing their internal customers is going to be the sales teams, because they're going to be generating and providing sales teams with leads which they can then follow up with. Could be parts or products. So if you work within a warehouse, or if you work within particularly the engineering, manufacturing industries, where your organisation is producing physical goods, then internal teams may require parts or products from a central location, which you may have to provide. Could also be if you work within an admin department for a large organisation, where you might be involved in ordering supplies such as printer paper, toner, envelopes, various stationery as well. That could also be products which are supplied to other teams. Stationery, just mentioned that there. IT support and advice, if you work within a more IT or technical area of your organisation, then providing advice and support on computer systems and processes would also be a service to an internal customer. You've also got reports, and these can be various and will depend on the industry and your particular job role, but any report that you provide for other people within your organisation, that would also be a product or service. Filed documents as well, providing administrative support to other teams, providing training to other members or other teams, providing company vehicles or maintaining company vehicles, and booking travel and meetings. So admin support around booking travels and meetings would also be a service to internal customers. So those are some examples, and of course when you're producing evidence, you want to look at what you would be doing in your organisation to provide products and services to internal customers, but that just gives you a bit of an example of the sorts of things which might be relevant. External customers, in comparison, these are typically products and services that your company would offer to other individuals and organisations. So what is customer service? It can be quite a hard thing to define, something everyone's heard about, but can hard to actually put a definition onto it. So what is customer service? Customer service is a direct one-on-one interaction between a consumer making a purchase and a representative of that company that's selling it. Most retailers see this direct interaction as a critical factor in ensuring buyer satisfaction and encouraging repeat business. That definition there is more focused so on external customers, but you could change it. Rather than making a purchase, they're receiving a service internally, and it's still essential. It's a critical factor in satisfaction within the organisation for those people who are receiving that service. Even today, when much of customer service is handled by automated self-service systems, the option to speak to a human being is seen as a necessary necessity to most businesses, and it's a key aspect of servant leadership. So it's key that people get to interact with people, even if the process is being automated. It's important there's always jump off points where customers can speak to the key person. So if we think about internal customers, might be a set process for requesting that you complete work, but particularly if it's a one-off, if there's special circumstances around it, it's very important that other person can contact you directly and make that clear that there are some special circumstances around the work that they're asking for, to see if they can be taken into consideration, maybe particular deadlines, for example, or additional work that doesn't normally need completed. So can you think of a time where you have been provided with bad customer service? A lot of the time it can be easy to think about, what does bad customer service look like? What impact does bad customer service have on you? And I think everyone has had an experience where they have received bad customer service. You could be out buying a phone, buying a car, any sort of online purchase where you've received the wrong thing, the wrong size, it's been damaged, it's arrived late, and you've had to follow up to get it resolved. What are the sort of things that really put you off and really just annoyed you about the service that was offered? And how did that make you feel? I mean, typically if I've received bad customer service, wouldn't want to go back to that organisation again. I'd remember it, I wouldn't want to recommend them to anyone else, and I wouldn't be using them again. I'd go to a competitor. So the sorts of things that would constitute bad customer service would be poor communication, particularly when the salesperson doesn't listen or is too pushy. Salespeople just come up and constantly start speaking. They don't ask you questions. They don't find out what it is that you're actually looking for. They just try and push whatever product or service that they're offering onto you in the hope that they'll wear you down and you'll buy. And the other one is that your expectations weren't met. So everyone's got expectations when they are looking to receive a product or a service. If you think about a music festival, you have certain expectations when you go there. So if it's a weekend away music festival, then you don't expect to be living in 5-star accommodation, for example, and you don't expect there to be first class food in restaurants available. What you expect is to be living in a tent, and you expect to have a burger van that provides sort of mediocre, okay food. But you do expect that your experience will be really fun because you'll be provided with, or you'll be able to go and visit and see live musicians, whatever festival it is. You'll know who's on the list to play, and you probably won't expect to be. You expect to queue a little bit, but you probably won't expect excessive queues. So those would be the sort of expectations for a weekend festival. And if you go there and you find out that actually your ticket doesn't let you get access to some of the key names that's on the lineup, and that you have to queue for 5 hours to get in, and that the prices for the mediocre food vans are extortionate, then your expectations are going to be met. You didn't expect that to happen when you purchased that ticket, and that's going to make you quite angry. So that's what it means when expectations aren't met. And you can also probably think of examples where in different situations, different things you've bought something, actually I didn't realise, I thought it did this and it turns out it doesn't. You're going to be really annoyed, and one of the things that good customer service can do is to manage people's expectations, and a lot of that is about asking questions to the customer about what it is they want and to really understand what their expectations are. And that way, if their expectations are too high, then you can chat with them and you can lower their expectations by letting them know up front that, well, actually that's going to take a lot longer. Actually, the prices are going to be high, and if you want into that certain area, you have to buy the more expensive ticket. So at least they know. Delivering customer service externally. So first you've got to understand what customers value in your organisation, and then you want to make a plan for actions and policies. When you're dealing with customers externally, so external customers, you want to be realistic and honest. You don't want to overpromise what you're going to deliver them, because then their expectations will be really high and they'll be really disappointed when you don't. And if they are disappointed, they're going to complain, they're going to return whatever product they've received, or they're going to ask for a refund if it's a service that they're not happy with. You want to put context behind explanations. So you want to be given reasons to customers. Everyone likes to understand, and if you just say, no, you can't have that, or it's going to take 6 months for you to get that, people initially aren't going to believe you. They're just going to think that you can't be bothered, or other people are getting it and they're not. So it's important you explain the reasons why. So if you were to say there's a reason why this product or service can't be offered to you within the next 6 months, then the customer will understand and they'll be more appreciative. So that is better customer service. You also want to listen to the customer and what they're saying. So you wouldn't want to be going straight in there, straight away offer them. Think about a car salesman. If it's a car dealership and you go there and the salesperson just goes on and on about the first car that you see, you're not going to be very satisfied because they've not listened to you. It'd be far better if that salesperson had asked you questions to find out what sort of car you want, what size you want, what colour, how much your budget is, and in that way that they can then add some value and recommend the best car for you that they've got. And because they've listened to you, that's going to provide a better service because they can actually start to recommend what it is you're looking for, rather than just pitching you the first car that you look at. Customers always appreciate advice. It adds value. Customers always appreciate advice and tips. So always have good advice, good tips. Remember, you're an expert in the area which you're providing customer service to and which your organisation does. Your organisation's expert at it because they do it professionally on a daily basis every day. And there'll be little insights and little things that you know and you've picked up on, things that other customers have benefited from in situations where their product or service has benefited other customers, and you could relate that to your customer's situation. And always give reasons why so that the customer understands. I've already mentioned that. You are an expert in your field. Customers aren't. Customers aren't experts in the field that you're in. They know what they want, but they aren't experts in that field. And you can a lot of time use that authority to influence that customer and provide them with advice. And that is particularly good to do that early on in the process. So if you can explain at almost the first interaction why that product can't be delivered in 3 months, or why the price is going to be the price early on, then that's seen as some advice and some guidance, a wee helpful tip for the customer. If you leave it till the purchase decision much later on in the sort of sales cycle, then they're going to be quite unhappy because they're going to think that they've just been sort of hit with it, they weren't expecting it, and it's not seen as helpful at that point. It's more about you're into the negotiation stage, and they just think of it as you're trying to negotiate a better deal for your organisation. So always best to do that up front and early on. Delivering customer service internally. So for this one, think about some of the business processes which you do. Where does the information, products or services come from? Who deals with them before they come to you? And what happens to them after you've dealt with them? And you'll start to understand and reflect on the fact that it's a team effort. You don't just perform services, you don't perform tasks that simply benefit yourself and benefit your immediate team. You'll find that a lot of the work that you do, there'll be a further stage, and that further stage will be dealt with by another team. Or someone else will have done a bit of work, and then that work comes to you, and you're essentially performing a service to them when that happens. And there's many different examples of customer service that you might not initially realise until you think about it and until you reflect on it. But that's a good sort of exercise to understand what could constitute what is customer service internally, what tasks would follow that definition. Other people can only do their job effectively if you do yours. You also depend on others doing their job effectively so that you can do your job effectively. Their needs are the specific things that they require from you. So what are customer needs? They are the specific things that they require from you. Needs, it's not essential needs. Someone, in this, if we go back to the festival example, it's not an absolute need that you could queue for 5 hours if you really wanted to. That's not an essential need, but that's not really what we're talking about here when we're saying needs. Needs are just what the customer wants, what they want. It's not an essential need, and that's what we talk about when we're saying customer needs. So as much as you could queue for 5 hours, you really don't want to. Your needs when you pay for that is you want a quick, efficient service. You want to be in within 45 minutes at the most into the festival. Expectations are how they think that you're going to provide that service, and a lot of time that ties into the standard. So what's the standard? And a lot of time that's something that can be overlooked. So standard is the quality of the product or service. How quickly are they going to get it? Is it going to be wrapped up well? Is there going to be a lot of detail in it? And a lot of time the standard has got to do with price too. So the better the standard, usually the higher the price. So exceeding expectations. It's always important to exceed expectations. And this is a lot easier to do when you manage expectations properly. If you don't manage expectations, then customer expectations, what they expect, are going to be very high. But if you manage expectations early on, you say realistically what the good and service is that you're going to provide to them, then their expectations will be realistic, and it's going to be a lot easier to exceed them. So even if they're realistic, the benefit to the customer, the surprise and the happiness that they'll get that you've done better than what they're expecting is going to be really good. Whereas if the expectation is really high, it's going to be very difficult to hit it, and you're going to have to go way out your way to be able to do that. So if you manage expectations, it actually makes it easier for you to exceed expectations. So let's use an example. This is what would happen if your job was to email the telesales team leader the weekly list of potential customers for the team to call, and you failed. So we're using a wee example here. The example we're using, someone's working as a administrator in marketing, and they have got to provide the sales team leader with a list of potential customers. There's a list of sales leads. So the telesales staff would be unable to make follow-up calls to generate business. That would ultimately result in sales orders being lower for that week or month, so that period where they got the sales leads. Less revenue would be generated for the business, sales results for the telesales team would be lower than usual, and performance-related bonuses for the sales team members would consequently be lower or not awarded as they were before. The implications of not meeting these expectations would be sustained working relationships between you and your colleagues. So the working relationships internally will be damaged. Those salespeople will have a lower job satisfaction. There'll be reduced business efficiency because it's going to take them longer to make the same number of sales. There's possible knock-on effects to other colleagues or external customers, and this can cause a detrimental impact on the business. Because it's sales, it's actually impacting on the bottom line, the amount of revenue that business is taking in. So you can see here from this example the impact that the poor customer service has had. So when you're doing your evidence, you want to be thinking about an example of a time where you've exceeded expectations or when you've not generated expectations. So you want to have your evidence related to your job. So I'm using this example just to illustrate the point. So think about a time that you've been involved in where you've either exceeded expectations or expectations haven't been exceeded, and what impact that's had. So what's the impact then of exceeding the expectations of the customer? Going above and beyond, you'd have increased sales, you'll have increased customer loyalty, your business, your organisation will have a better image, a better brand. Increase in brand loyalty. So brand loyalty means that customers recognise your logo, they recognise your organisation, the products you offer, and you can charge higher for that because they recognise it as a quality, well trusted, well respected brand. It will increase the value of your business and the value which your business offers to other people, to your customers. Makes life easier for the customer because they're getting a good service. They don't have to deal with problems and issues all the time. Think about when you've ordered something, the wrong things come. It's a hassle to have to deal with that and get it sent back, and then you have to wait to the next item sent out again, the correct item sent out. So doing it right the first time makes life easier for the customer. There's also a failure to meet minimum standards to external customers, so that would include complaints. So if you don't exceed expectations or if you fail to meet minimum standards, you're going to see an increase in complaints, unhappy customers. You're going to have returned items, cancelled future orders, customers going to a competitor. So those are all things that you're going to see if you don't deliver good customer service. It can be good for organisations to have a customer service charter. Customer service charter sets out exactly what a customer should expect. Your organisation might use different terms to describe this, so it's worth finding out if your organisation has one of these, and if so, what it is, and maybe what you would do to follow, or maybe produce evidence on examples of tasks where you have followed that customer service charter or your customer service policies and procedures so that you meet and exceed expectations. What's the value in exceeding expectations? Why bother? What is the benefit to you, to the organisation, and to the customer? So it would result in improved business confidence. People who work for your organisation will be happier and they'll believe the organisation is going to be successful. There's going to be business growth. Therefore, you can have a career. You're going to get paid more money. Customers are also happy. You'll get more customers because it looks like your business is strong, it's stable, it performs well. Increased performance, so more profit, more growth. Increased revenue and performance, and increased profits. So all sort of the same thing there. What's the role of internal customers? So you've got suppliers, internal customer service, and external customer service. Good external customer service always depends on good external customer service. So that should be internal customer service. So that means being more productive, increasing job satisfaction, increasing motivation, and producing a higher quality of work. So always remember that Internal customer service and external customer service, that is total customer service, that is customer service 360 degrees. And good external customer service, that depends on good internal, because if you don't have good internal customer service, the work internally is being delayed, things are missed, there's no attention to detail, then that's going to be evident to your external customers who are actually paying money for the services and the goods that your organisation offers. What's the value of exceeding expectations? So satisfied customers leads to repeat business. This creates future revenue stream which the organisation can rely on. What's a competitor organisation? A competitor is an organisation which competes in the same or similar industry and offers similar products or services. And customer expectations. Customers expect a certain level of customer service, particularly if it's a large purchase. The level of customer service needs to be as good as the competitors or better for you to compete. So that's why it's important to recognise your competitors. You want to be making sure that you outperform your competitors, so know who they are, know what they do, and that way you can understand how you can do better than them. So building positive relationships. This is a key aspect of providing good customer service. So how do you do this? How do you build good positive relationships with internal customers? So this would mean that you have good two-way communication between you and your internal customers, your colleagues. You'd have effective interpersonal relationships. There's a team building culture, there's a team culture. It's not a culture of doing the minimum, not helping each other out. That's not my job. It's a culture of helping everyone out, and that way everyone wins, everyone's more effective, and everyone's happier in their job. And for that to work, you need to have a climate of trust and openness. There can't be a lot of secrets, a lot of information not being communicated properly to people who need to know about the information. It's a climate of trust and openness where you can discuss things with your colleagues openly. You trust their judgment. You don't think they're just after their own self-interest, and that way you build up a good relationship. And there's a collaboration for solving problems. So problem solving is often a team effort. Individuals alone might not have the best answer to the problems, but if you work with other people, if you have a quick team meeting and you say this is the problem, how can we resolve it, others can bring their skills and experience that they've got to the table and offer solutions which you might not necessarily have thought about, and that can help solve problems really quickly. A lot of time also you can't solve the problem by yourself because you're only responsible for a particular small area of the organisation as a whole, and sometimes to solve the problem it requires action from people who work in other teams with other areas of responsibility. And so if you have that good culture of team working, helping everyone else out, then it's easier to go to those people who are in different teams and to get that problem solved, which would require them to take further action. And how to build positive relationships with external customers. So you want to be building long-term relationships. You don't want to be thinking the short term, the immediate sale. You want to be thinking about long-term relationships. You want to build a good reputation, and that way it will encourage repeat business and it will retain your customers. It's a lot harder to gain a new customer than it is to keep existing ones, and that's why the focus of all good customer service when it comes to external customers is on building long-term relationships and building a good relationship. It's not about the short-term immediate sale, it's about how can we get that customer to come back and order from us again and again. Having these good long-term relationships with external customers also helps attract new customers through word of mouth and through recommendations. It can also generate good PR and it can create free publicity. Having this good reputation, people just naturally associate your organisation with good service, with a high quality product. That can create good PR, it can create good marketing, it can create free publicity because people are talking about your organisation and your brand. So what's a quality standard? So quality standards are documents that provide requirements, okay, specifications, guidelines, characteristics which can be used consistently to ensure that materials, products, processes and services are fit for purpose. That's what a quality standard is. It's not about going for the cheapest option, because typically the cheapest option will be the option with the lowest quality. Sometimes that is, sometimes it's not something that's important, and cheapest lowest quality option is fine, but you need to understand the context of the product or the service that you're offering and understand what is the appropriate quality standard that it should be at. So it's about determining the actual quality. To what extent does that product or service meet the needs or meet the requirements of the customer? So it could include products and services that the organisation provides, the suppliers and the distributors which they use. Quality standards could include the ways in which an organisation recruits, manages and trains staff. It could be about their commitment to customer service, and it can also be about the approach to management and leadership. So quality standards. So let's have some examples. So ISO 9001, that's an example of an international quality standard that is shared amongst organisations. So it's they get registered, and that is a standard, and that any organisation that meets that standard, you know what the quality is of what they're doing. There's also Customer First. So this Customer First is awarded to organisations which achieve excellent customer service. So it's a recognition scheme. There's Investors in People. So that is a quality standard which says or recognises the commitment that organisations have to develop staff and providing career development and training for their employees. And there's a disability symbol. So this is awarded to recognise organisations meeting commitments to employing disabled people, and it's awarded by Job Centre Plus. So as an example of some quality standards that are awarded by other organisations to perhaps your organisation. But there's also quality standards that can be set internally. So your organisation will have their own quality standards, and you can look at those, and that should be able to help you produce evidence to cover these points. So you want to find out what is your organisation quality standards, how do those affect your role, and what action do you take to ensure that you consistently meet those quality standards when providing customer service. So quality standards in your workplace, that could be timescales or service level agreements. Could be about durability. How durable is the product that you're offering? Service level agreements is to do, basically what service level agreements are, it's an agreement that within a certain time period, a certain task or activity will be completed. So perhaps you have a service level agreement to contact customers who leave an inquiry within 24 hours. So that your service level agreement would be 24 hours for that task. Quality standards could be how quickly that you reply to email queries. Could be checks which you must make on the accuracy of your words. Could be the format and wording of letters that you send out to customers. The way in which you must speak to your customers on the phone. The speed at which the customer complaints must be dealt with. The number of calls which you must handle per hour or per day. Could also be the number of complaints which you must resolve. So those last ones there are looking at quality standards in a sort of quantity as well, and that can be the case, but a lot of the time it's not just about the quantity, it's about what standard, were those complaints actually dealt with properly, or was it just a tick box exercise to say, yeah, I called them, I seen what it was about, apologise, and we move on. But was that problem really resolved? That's the real question. That'd be a better representative of what a quality standard is. How quickly complaints are resolved. A quality standard could be answering the phone within 3 rings, so customers aren't waiting for lengthy periods on the phone to you. And a quality standard also being polite and courteous to customers. Agreeing quality standards and timescales. So it's important to agree quality standards with your customers, and it is also important to agree timescales. And the two are interlinked, because if you have a high quality standard, it's going to take you longer to do. So it's important to agree the timescales with the customer, so they know there is often a bit of a trade-off. Why is it important to do this? Well, it should be standardised throughout your organisation. It gets others' input. It's not just something that's imposed upon you or that you impose upon your customers. It gets ownership and commitment, that you've agreed what the standard is, what the timescale is, and it allows a plan to be made for you and for your internal customers. And it means that you know what's expected of you and when it's expected by. So you know what you're doing, and you can plan out your time effectively. What's the importance of agreeing timescales? So timescales allow customers to know when they expect to be dealt with or when they expect to receive their good or service. They'll know when phone calls are going to be returned and when they're going to receive updates. Might be about when letters are being sent out and how often they're sent out, when information will be supplied, and it demonstrates your service commitment to them. It's important to have clear communication if there are issues with the timeline. So setting and meeting quality standards and timescales. It's very important to set good quality standards, so ensure that the standards are aligned to the needs of the internal customers. This saves working to a higher standard than required. Proactively work together with your internal customers when you're developing quality standards, and this ensures that they're collaborative. Ask for input from your internal customers. This will prevent irrelevant standards from being created. A lot of time, just creating a standard for the sake of it isn't beneficial, and it can slow people down. It can be needless a lot of the time. So you want to have input from your customers when it comes to creating quality standards. This could be done formally through feedback questionnaires. It could be an informal, what do you think of this? Let me know, and you take that on board when it comes to creating a quality standard. Don't over promise, and this will require assertiveness. So don't over promise what the quality standard is going to be. Don't over promise that's what we're going to do and we're going to do that every time. And that can require assertiveness because you've got to be quite assertive and say, actually, no customer, that's not something that we're able to do. That's just too much. And you can explain why it's too much, and you can say what it is that you will be able to do and what you will be able to commit to, rather than just agreeing to everything the customer asks for. Targets should be SMART. So SMART stands for specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound, particularly when it comes to timescales. So what's the targets for setting timescales? You want to identify how quickly they need various services from you, establish how quickly you're actually able to deliver them, work out your time, and that way you can set a timescale with your customer. So it's important to do that. And for your evidence, you want to be reflecting and discussing or writing about a time where you have done that with your customers. Let's have a look at SMART targets in a little bit more detail. So what is a SMART target? So first of all, it's specific. So you want to state exactly what it is that you want to achieve. If it's not specific, if it's very vague, how are you going to know if you've achieved that target? You're not going to know. In the same way, it's got to be measurable. So if you can't measure and see that that goal's been met, then you can't achieve it. It should be achievable. So that should be a stretch. It should be challenging, but you should be able to achieve it. It shouldn't be unrealistic. If it's too much in a too short a period of time when you're dealing with other issues, you're dealing with other customers, other tasks you've got to do, that's not going to be achievable. So it's not going to be a good target because you're never going to hit it anyway. Should be relevant. So how does the goal tie in with your key responsibilities and how is it aligned to your objectives? And time bound. So if there's no deadline on any task that's been issued, it's never going to get done, because if you're prioritising your time effectively, then you're going to be prioritising tasks which are more urgent, which means there's a deadline and they end sooner. And if you're always doing that, then the tasks that don't have deadlines are always going to be of less of a priority, because you know what you need to do for next week, you know what's due in the next 2 days, you're going to focus on that. You're not going to focus on a task that there's no deadline, you can just do whenever. Meeting quality standards and timescales. So now that the standards are met, how do you achieve them? So they're set, how do you achieve them? You would do some time management, essentially. That's what all this is about. This is all about time management. So you'd maybe use a diary, you maybe use a to-do list. You would look at what work you've got to do. You'd estimate how long that work's going to take, and you'd plan out when you're going to do it. Might help to bounce it off someone to say, look, do you think this is realistic, particularly if it's tasks you haven't dealt with before, and therefore it'd be quite difficult for you to estimate how long it's going to take for you to complete those. And you could also look to delegate if you have people who you're responsible for and you can delegate to. And if you don't, you could always ask for support. So if you feel like there's a lot of work going on, you're going to miss some deadlines, you'd ask for support, you'd speak to a mentor, you'd speak to a manager, and they could provide you with some help, or perhaps they could arrange for the work to be delegated to someone else. So dealing with internal customer problems. So now we're looking at dealing with customer problems. A lot of the time, with the best intentions, it's not possible to meet all customer expectations, and when that happens, it creates a problem, and that can create a complaint. So this will happen where products and services don't meet requirements or expectations. And it can also happen when they're not to a standard, and those standards can be in terms of time or quality. So how would you deal with problems that arise? You'd have to have good communication, you'd have to be prompt, you'd have to take initiative. You wouldn't leave it for the customer to take the initiative. If a customer comes to you with a problem, the best thing to do is to take ownership of that, not to pass it on to someone else. Might be it's got nothing to do with you, in which case you would want to first of all take ownership and find the person who is responsible for dealing with it and pass it on to them, in which case that they could then take ownership. But generally speaking, you need to have one person that takes ownership of any problems and of any complaints, takes initiative, communicates clearly and timely with the customer. There should be integrity, so that means there's not really covering up. You're being open, you're being honest. Okay, we've made a mistake. Let's see what we can do to solve this. And tenacity, so you wouldn't give up if the problem's too great. You'd actively try and find a solution for your customer. There are consequences of not dealing with customer needs effectively, and if you don't deal with customer needs, customer problems, it will result in an increase in complaints. Customers will take their business elsewhere, and you also suffer from reputational damage. That is customers telling others the poor service they've received, and that will put off whoever they're telling from coming to your organisation. So let's have a look at some customer problems for internal customers. So there'd be delays in receiving goods, products or services. Perhaps the wrong products, services have been delivered, or the products or services are of a poor quality. The customer, particularly when the customer is expecting a higher quality to be provided. And some examples of problems for external customers, that would be when products, again, not delivered on time, they've got the wrong product delivered, the product's faulty, they might need advice on how to use the product or service wasn't as described, they're not happy with the service, or the customer can't get through to complain. So sometimes that can be the complaint, that the customer service process is so bad that they can't actually get their complaint through to the right person. They've been bounced about different departments, different teams. It's not been clear who they contact. There's no phone number from the phone. There's no good email address, and when they do email, it's not responded to. That can also result in a complaint. So how would you deal with customer problems? So you'd want to understand that the customer will likely be upset and they'll want to vent, and they should give them an opportunity to do so. So let them vent, particularly at the start. Let them get it off their chest. Then you want to turn the complaint into a positive opportunity. Complaints are negative, and a lot of the time the focus is on the fact that it's very negative, but actually good customer service is able to turn a complaint into a positive opportunity. Think about a time where I went to a cafe. It was a really good cafe, ordered some food, and it was sitting waiting for a while for it to come out. When it came out, it was cold. So wasn't very happy at that. So I went to complain. I went to say, actually, this is cold. It's not right. And they apologised. They cooked it again, and it was warm. Cooked the food again, and they also provided me with a bag of cakes and desserts. And that was them turning that complaint into a positive opportunity. And I've been back there many times because it always sticks in my mind how good those cakes and desserts were. So that's an example of customer complaints being turned into an opportunity. So it's good to turn them around. A lot of the time, customers really respect good customer service. So even if initially the service is bad, they feel valued, that your organisation went out their way to correct it. So you should always listen. Don't interrupt the customer when they're speaking. Don't jump to conclusions either. Make notes on what they say for reference later, particularly if the complaint is quite complicated. There's a number of different steps or things that went wrong. My example there, obviously you don't need to take notes because it's quite straightforward, but depending on what the service, the products that you offer, could be quite a complicated process. Maybe an example of that was I had an issue with a bank opening an account. I think that the issue was that a option hadn't been selected in one of the forms, and it caused endless delays with different teams opening the account, particularly for the online banking part of it. and it required numerous trips to the bank, numerous phone calls. It was quite complicated to resolve that, and so therefore detailed notes had to be taken to track that complaint. You want to pause for 2 seconds before you respond to them. Be polite and calm. Minimise the damage and offer a solution which will make the customer happy. Find out what it is that they want. There's always something that you can do to turn the complaint around. So find out what that is. Ask the customer questions, don't assume. Find out if it's possible and offer them that solution. Even if it's just I will look into this, I'm going to speak with this person and I'll come back to you. And at least then you're taking ownership and they know what's going to happen, and that in itself is a solution. For internal customers, inform the supplier about a problem as soon as you can. Phone call face to face is more personal. Explain the effect of the problem on your work and ask when the corrected supplies will be able to send to you. So this is talking about supplies. It might not necessarily be supplies, it could be a service. You could be processing, someone else could be processing work for you. Maybe you've got a new customer, they filled out their form, another team is responsible for creating the customer account on your system, and it hasn't been done within the time frame that was agreed. So that would be a service, and you'd want to follow the same steps, but you'd want to do it based on a service. So you'd want to phone them ideally, explain the effect it's having, explain what could be done, what you're looking for them to do, and ask how long will it take, and hopefully the other person will take ownership. Keep the exchange polite, but keep it to the point as well. And thank the other person for their efforts to correct the problem. So let's look now at complaints procedure. So what is a complaints procedure? This is a complaint is an expression of a dissatisfaction on a consumer's behalf to a responsible party. It can also be described in a positive sense as a report from a customer providing documentation about a problem with a product or service, and it should be viewed positively. So complaints should be viewed positively, and a complaints procedure is how your organisation deals with these and what is the processes. Who is it that's responsible for it? Is there escalation processes depending on how serious the problem is? Is there budget that's been put in place for allocating resources of people, or for replacing goods or redoing work that hasn't been done properly? How is it documented and recorded so that these problems don't happen again for future issues and problems that customers might have? So that's continuous improvement, and that should be a key part of your customer complaints procedure as well. So what's the purpose of it? Well, it's a standard way of dealing with complaints within your organisation. It ensures that issues are resolved and actions taken so they don't happen again. And it also ensures that complaints are taken seriously. A good complaints procedure allows complaints to be resolved quickly. It ensures that everyone who complains is treated fairly and equally. What's the value in it? Well, customers know that there is a procedure if they're unhappy about any work, a good product that they've received. It irons out any inefficiencies and promotes productivity, because if there's a lot of complaints, something's not been done right, it requires rework, requires the service to be done again, it requires the product to be sent out again, and that is a waste of resources, a waste of people's time, and it lowers productivity. So if your complaints procedure identifies a lot of the issues that's coming up frequently, things can be put in place to prevent it from happening again, and that will therefore increase productivity. It allows problems to be tackled quickly rather than letting them go on forever, and repeat problems can be documented over time. So that's how you identify that a problem's happening over time. It's documented, and then you know that action should be taken to prevent it from happening again. If it's not recorded, it would happen over and over again, and you wouldn't necessarily know if it's a big team that's dealing with it. Maybe different people are dealing with the different complaints. Whereas if it's documented in a standardised way, you can run a report and see, okay, that thing's happening a lot. How do we stop it from happening again? Do we change the form? Do we add extra resources? There's different things that can be done to prevent issues from happening. So each organisation will have their own complaints procedure which should be followed. Depending on the nature of the complaint, this will involve notifying a manager or director, logging the complaint, investigating the complaint, and then making a decision about how best to resolve it. Most complaints are small and can be dealt with quickly and informally as soon as they have been identified. And it's not necessary, just because it's a complaints procedure, I don't think it has to be a formal process. There should be one of those for serious complaints. But a lot of times there's many little complaints that come up and they're dealt with informally at the time they arise, and it's dealt with and you move on. So that's how you would deliver customer service. How would you monitor it though? How would you monitor and evaluate the customer service that your team and that your organisation is delivering? Well, what's the purpose of monitoring? Why would you bother? It establishes the quality that is being provided. It ensures that issues are highlighted early on before you get to the stage of losing customers, and it ensures that customers are happy. So that's the point of monitoring customer service. It means you can identify what problems are happening frequently, and you can put things in place to prevent them from happening again. If an organisation doesn't keep track of customer service, they'll miss an opportunity to make improvements. So how would an organisation go about monitoring customer service? So there's different techniques, there's different ways that organisations can go about monitoring to see how do we keep track of the complaints, how do we keep track of the service that we're issuing to customers. And that can be done through questionnaires. You've probably experienced some of this before, particularly if you've dealt with a call centre. You often receive a text afterwards, rate the service that was offered you today on a scale of 1 to 10, and then maybe any comments you've got. You could have focus groups, which is where you get a group of customers to discuss and describe their experience with your organisation. You could have one-on-one meetings, particularly if it's internally. You could have a meeting with the person that's unhappy, and you can investigate what went wrong and what could be done to rectify and prevent it from happening again. Suggestion box, so that's a good one. You'll see a lot of these all over the place for internal and for external customers. It's an anonymous way of suggesting ideas that might not want to say, and you be known as the person who brought up the suggestion. But it's a good way to do it anonymously. Say what you're really thinking, and that can drive improvements. You've also got the websites. There's lots of tools that can be deployed on organisations' websites for tracking complaints. It could be digitally. You can have a little message function on there to message customer service to deal with an issue. You can have forms online, questionnaires or online forms to complete, and data from specialist software. So perhaps a customer relationship management software, a CRM system. A lot of time, these softwares document and record any interaction your organisation's had with a customer. So a lot of time you'll find that any customer service issues have been recorded on there, and you can run a report or you can look into specific customers and find out what the problems are and how, if the customer service has been good or if it's been bad customer service. So let's look at questionnaires specifically now. So what we've got here is an example of a typical customer feedback questionnaire. So they will usually record the customer's name and their details just to identify who it was that completed this, although some feedback questionnaires can be anonymous, particularly for education. So if you receive, you probably will receive a questionnaire about the service which your training provider has delivered to you. A lot of time that will be anonymous because less people want to fill it out if their name's on it. So it depends on the questionnaire and what service, what industry you're in, as to whether they'll record names. Typically they will have there'll probably be a small number of questions. The longer it is, the less likely people are to respond. There'll be quite generic questions. So this one's got, how do you rate your overall experience with us? And you can rate them out of 10 on a scale. How likely are you to recommend us to family and friends? How likely are you to come back for repeat business? And how do you rate your overall experiences is there again. And offer for any additional comments is also on the end. And for each of those scores out of 10, there's a box to explain your reasoning for your score. So you get two types of information from there, two different methods, quantitative and qualitative. Quantitative, think quantity is information that comes back numerically. So 1 to 10 can be expressed as a number. So it can be very, very easy to run a report based on this questionnaire of everyone who's responded and to work out what's the average score. And that can tell you very quickly if the customer service for your organisation is effective or not. If it's a low score, you know it's bad. If it's a high score, you know it's good. Qualitative is information that's expressed as words, and that's where the boxes come into it. So you're not just relying on the quantity on a number, because the number itself doesn't really tell you much. It doesn't tell you the reasoning why. So that's why you've got these boxes, so that customers can type in a response and explain their reasons, and you can analyse that. Now it's much harder to analyse words. It's easy just to run a report and work out an average. That can be done in seconds using a spreadsheet. The text takes a little bit longer to categorise it, so you'd probably look through it and you'd categorise common themes or common subjects or common words that come back in the feedback, and that's how we've analysed that. It takes longer, but usually can get more detailed feedback out of doing it that way. So questionnaires can be completed in large volumes. They can easily be sent out. Care needs to be taken on the exact wording of the questions, and this is to prevent them being ambiguous or leading. So example, you wouldn't have a question, why do you prefer X? Because this has an assumption that the person who's responding prefers X, therefore it could lead their answer. So you don't want to have any assumptions within your question. So the wording of the question you want to pay particular attention to. A better question would be, do you prefer X or Y? And then follow up with, what's your reasons for your preference? You'd want to have open questions, so this would require a developed answer, or you could have closed questions which can be answered by yes, no, true or false, tick box, or a scaled response. A scaled response would be like a scale from 1 to 10. So there's different types of questions, and you want to have a good reason. You'd want to think very carefully about why you'd use different questions, and you might want a combination of them. Yes, no is easy to analyse, scales are easy to analyse, tick boxes are easy to analyse, but open questions are harder. But you could potentially get more valuable information from an open question, but it will take longer to analyse them. So a lot of the time it's about a combination of both. Surveys usually should be closed answers to get any meaningful results. If it's too open, it's going to take too long for you to analyse the results, and you're never going to analyse them, and therefore it's going to be meaningless. Other methods, focus groups. So these are small groups, typically less than 12 people, that discuss options together. The group is led by an independent person. It's important that this person isn't biased or leading. Their role should be to develop the discussion. However, results are difficult to create. It's difficult to create a report on it because it's got to be quite in depth. It might involve transcribing what the people have said. If not, it's going to be less accurate when you're just bullet pointing the key themes of what each person is saying. One-on-one meetings, they allow for an honest discussion. It allows for secrecy and confidentiality. It's not done in a group. And it is effective at getting negative feedback. So the main benefits of doing a one-on-one meeting is that you can get a good understanding of negative feedback. Careful notes need to be taken. Positives, negatives and areas of improvement. Specific issues of concern and overall satisfaction. These are all things which should be recorded. However, it is very time consuming because it's got to be done on a one-on-one basis. If you've got a lot of customers, you could only ever do a sample size. You can only ever do one in every 30, 40, 50 customers, whatever has been agreed. Because it can be very time consuming. And it's also always going to be focused on the one issue. It's very hard to get a broad overall understanding. It's normally going to be involve discussing a particular issue that customers had or a particular service that they've had. It's not going to be the experience they've had overall. We've got suggestion box there as well. So this is where comments can be written down and submitted. You can have a digital suggestion box. So this could be a dedicated email mailbox. So for example, suggestions@yourcompany.com. So it doesn't have to be written a bit of paper and put in a box. It could be emailed into a specific mailbox. Another example would be a thank you at yourcompany.com. So it's looking for positive suggestions or positive, thank you for, you get to respond to any good customer service you've had rather than a complaint. It can be difficult to collate these and analyse though because they are unstructured. It's not like a questionnaire where you're saying yes, no, what's the scale 1 to 10. It's unstructured. People can write whatever they like in these emails on the paper that are put in the suggestion box. So it can be very difficult to analyse. We've got websites as well, so different methods can be used. It can be similar to a suggestion box or questionnaire. There's also different technologies such as chatbox, being able to message straight through to customer service team. The benefit of that is it's very easy to collate information as it's submitted in a digital form. So now that you've gathered your customer service feedback, you then have to, the next step would be to collate and evaluate it so you can come to some sort of meaningful judgment. Those responses on their own are going to be pretty meaningless. If you get one response, it's good, if you get some positive feedback that one time, but it'd be of more value if you had a number of them. You could gather them together and you could work out something from a larger set of information. To do that, you'd have to analyse the data, and that would depend on the type of data that you've got. And we mentioned them already, so you've got quantitative and qualitative data. So quantitative data is expressed in numbers, so that for example would be the scale 1 to 10. And qualitative data is expressed as words. So discussed that already. So these are the sort of pros and cons of each method that we've already discussed. So questionnaires that can be summarised quickly in a report. It's because the same set of structures, questions are answered over and over again. Focus groups are more time consuming, but the answers are going to be more developed and intricate. Requires it to be recorded, transcribed and summarised. Suggestion boxes can be difficult because they're unstructured, can be split into negative and positive feedback. Positive feedback can be communicated to staff by email, Teams meeting, newsletters and blog posts. Negative feedback will be put through more detailed analysis. Attention is paid to the quantity of negative feedback on a particular issue, and it may trigger a complaints procedure and be passed on to management. Summary of the report can be produced. So this is about summary reports where separate positive and negative feedback can be gathered. Negative feedback indicates action that needs to be taken. You can be careful of extreme feedback. If the feedback is too positive or too negative, then it's not going to be useful to you. It's best to ignore that sort of feedback. Look at the sort of average feedback and take it from there. Because on the extremes, it's just one particular case of someone who's really unhappy, and that's not representative of your typical customer and what they're looking for. Websites reports can be quickly generated, and this is typically exported in a spreadsheet format. Okay, so that's how you would gather and evaluate it, and from that you can then reach a decision. So you wouldn't do it from just the one response. You'd get it all together, you'd put it onto a spreadsheet, you'd analyse it in some way, and then that way you can come to a idea. So when you're gathering your evidence for these points for how do you analyse customer feedback, ideally you're doing it in a way where you're gathering a large sample size of feedback and you're analysing it and you're coming to some improvement. And it'd be even better if you could then talk about or discuss or produce evidence for how you implemented that for continuous improvement. So that's what we're looking at now, continuous improvement. So what does continuous improvement mean? There's different methods, there's different ways of doing it, but basically what they mean is that you are learning from your mistakes. So you will produce a business process, so a way that your service is going to be delivered, but over time that process should be updated somewhat frequently. It's not going to be every month, but somewhat frequently that process should be updated. And if a lot of time that's from complaints. So if you get a complaint, you realise this complaint's happening quite a lot. What's the reason for that complaint? Well, let's analyse it. Okay, we're doing this thing wrong. Why don't we update our business procedure? We change the form, we add a new box in to gather information earlier on in the process. We add a new step in the process. Or we add extra resources because that team's overwhelmed and they don't meet the timescales of the quality standards. And so that business process would then be updated, and that is what continuous improvement is. There's different ways here as well. So it's when you're doing continuous improvement, it's important to eliminate waste and unnecessary steps. And quality cycles is about when a committee consisting of staff from different teams meet to discuss improvements. So you can have that's a bit separate to a complaints procedure, where you have regular meetings or with a group of people who would take ideas from their team, suggestions to say, look, how do we improve based on what we're doing already. What's the benefits of continuous improvement? Well, you get employee involvement at all levels. You will have an increase in team activities. You will improve business efficiency. You'll have reductions in activities that do not add value to the business. The production of better products in a shorter time, so produce better products in a shorter time. You'll have better customer service, leading to increased satisfaction and therefore more customers remaining within the business. Reduction in waste, increased satisfaction, it saves time, improves quality as well. So hopefully this helps when it comes to looking at your customer service unit S325. We've covered all the main points, went through the main outcomes. First of all, what is customer service? We've then looked at how you manage customer expectations, how you then meet them, and then how once you've delivered for your customer, how you would collect information and analyse it to evaluate what you can improve on for the future. And that's what that unit's all about. And again, just a wee reminder, when you're producing evidence for this, we've used a number of examples here, went through a lot of the knowledge. It's important when you're producing your evidence so to relate this as strongly as possible to times where you've actually performed these skills in the workplace. Use examples of what your organisation does and what you've actually done to deliver customer service, evaluate it and to manage your customer expectations.